Employers, what's the most insane complaint you've had about an employee that turned out to be completely true? Story 1. Some kid whose father was the regional manager who also happened to be in the factory a lot. This kid was maybe 18 and went around flashing a blade at you if he didn't like you, which was classed as illegal as it had a 6-inch blade, and he kept it under his shirt in a holster. He harassed all the women to the point he never did any work and blamed the temp workers on the failures. He would constantly be pushing up against women and telling them what he wanted to do to them. He also stole information off the computers for employee records to get their phone numbers and addresses. How he got accessed was easy, as the manager above him let him use the computer with his password whenever he wanted, because he always pulled the "I can do what I want because my dad is the region manager" card. He had tons of complaints against him, and the police even showed up once and arrested him at work, but nothing ever came of it. Someone filmed him flashing himself at some women that worked there and running the blade along it, and that's why he got arrested at work. They took his blade as far as I know, but he had a new one a week later, and I don't know what came of it, but he seemed to wear getting arrested as a badge of pride. Before I left, he was made a full manager. Whenever anyone went directly to his dad just sighed and kinda zoned out and acted like he couldn't hear you. It was a messed up place, but luckily closed down a few years back, so I don't know where he's at now. A funny detail to add also is some girl there did actually date him for like a month for some reason, as I think she gave in pretty quick, and she said it was literally the worst intimacy she ever had, so we got to have a laugh at him for a few days where he didn't know what to do as everyone kept laughing at him, and he was actually quiet for a few days and hid away. I guess he couldn't take it when every single person laughed at him at once. He was used to cornering people and then not standing up to him maybe, after saying that they had a massive argument and she was let go the next day when they broke up. Guess he wanted to lay her off one last time. Story 2. I knew a guy who worked at Subway back when they gave out stamps. Basically, for every 6 inches of sub you bought, you earned a stamp, and once you filled a card with 8 stamps, you could get a free 6-inch sub. So this guy started only giving stamps to customers who asked for them. If they didn't ask, he pocketed their stamps and grew a sizable stack of complete stamp cards. Then over time, he started cashing them in. When a customer paid with cash, he would ring it in as a freebie, place his own completed stamp card in the till, and pocket the cash. Customer got their sub. Subway's till was balanced, and he had an extra $5 to $10 in his pocket. Everybody was happy. He worked there for a few years, and word was he racked up a few $1,000s running this scheme. No idea if anybody complained or if he was ever caught, but he did buy a motorbike. My man had 2 jobs at once. Story 3. So I worked retail, and we got this guy named something like Gus. My boss tells me, "Hey, this guy's got anxiety. Go easy on him, okay?" And so I was like, okay, that's cool. I get it, I can relate. I do everything I can to help him make sense of the infernal godforsaken hellscape that is retail. It starts off with little forgivable things: forgetting a task here, forgetting things there, accidentally giving the wrong info, and things like that. You know, newbie retail stuff like that. He quickly devolved in popularity as his complacency grew over time, and his helpful attitude shrank. My guy started messing around during his shift, getting caught on his phone while ignoring backup cashier calls and things like that. He would make punching motions behind the manager's back to other employees, tell off new employees, and play it all off like he was some innocent dope who didn't know any better. None of this got him fired. Day after day was a new complaint from an employee about responsibilities he shirked, or a customer about blatantly wrong info like, "Oh yeah, we have another location up on the hill," and we didn't. No idea whose son he was, because that was apparently all kosher. What actually got him fired is the one day he brought a dog and a super expensive dog collar into work. He claimed he almost hit the dog on the way to work, and it was running around wild, etc., etc. He tried to sell the dog collar to a customer, then tried to adopt out the dog to a coworker. This coworker was competent enough to take the dog to a vet, whereupon they found a microchip and contacted the actual owners. That's where the fun started. It came out that Gus never found the dog at all. He straight up kidnapped this dog from his neighbor and tried to pawn it off, knowing full well what he was doing. The guy lawyered up immediately, tried to sue Gus, and threatened to sue the store and the store manager if Gus wasn't fired. Suffice to say, Gus was gone the very same evening. Nothing else came of it, but we talked about him for years and years. My man could have done such great things with a name like Gustavo. Such a shame. Story 4. Many years ago, the bookshop I worked at hired a new employee with terminal cancer. Very sad, since she was quite young. She wasn't around too much due to the chemotherapy, etc. But when she was in, she worked in the children's department. She was actually a pretty good children's bookseller and was a huge fan of a fairly major American children's author. She ran the UK branch of his fan club and knew him personally. He occasionally flew her out to the States for events. One day she wasn't in, and all employees were called to a staff meeting. We were informed that she had passed away. There was a lot of sadness. Her close colleagues were devastated. Only Only a few days later, one of our staff happened to go into a branch of McDonald's in a nearby town. Guess who was working behind the counter? Go on, guess. Turns out she was never ill. She had made the whole cancer thing up, as well as faking her own death. For reasons that we never really fully understood, the general consensus was that it started out as a way to connect with her author hero and kind of spiraled from there. In the end, she couldn't handle living the lie anymore and so just up and had her mother tell people that she died. And then got a job in Maxi D's a few miles down the road and was surprised when she got found out. That was a pretty what the hell sort of experience for us all. She could have started a GoFundMe and everything, but wasted the opportunity. That is not cash money whatsoever. Story 5. Fasten up, readers, because this is going to make you sick to your stomach, especially to the ladies. My first job was with a very small company, which had about 19 employees in it. As you can imagine, people tend to get to know quite a bit about each other with such a few number of employees, typically because there's a daily interaction with many of them. I sat across from a very young and attractive girl I'll call Helen. She was one of the art designers for the company and had been there for about a year. About a month into my new job, and we've talked a bit, Helen started making comments about a specific employee, who I'll call Bob because I hate this name. Helen said Bob makes her uncomfortable, but has never done anything she could report. Little things like the way he stared at her as he walked by, or made idle talk, starting off with how nice she dressed. Helen arrived at the office about an hour before most people, which puts her almost in an alone status with Bob daily. She asked if I could come in early, and I said, sure. It didn't take long for me to notice her issues. And yes, this guy knew precisely how to stay under that line of a talk from HR versus pleasant daily conversation. Dude made my skin crawl too. That feeling you know something isn't right, but can't do nothing about it. Screw this feeling. Apparently, my early arrival must have hit Bob pretty hard, as his awkward conversation starters began to diminish as we'd engage in conversation before he came through the hallway. Pretty hard turned into a serious matter. A few weeks after I started coming in early, we both began to experience some weird things. Helen would come in and find her seat was damp, or the items on her desk were rearranged. I found my chair would be missing, broke, and my computer refusing to start because it was unplugged. Just little things, but not all at once, but definitely noticeable it couldn't be the fault of the night cleaning crew. So Helen and I decided to report these issues to HR. We believed they talked to Bob because the issues started to diminish. Unfortunately, not completely. In addition, things just started getting worse in a different way. For example, Helen worked on a new design for a customer portfolio, but the next day, the work was gone, completely removed, even from backup. Her chair would still be damp at times, but not as it used to be. On my end, some of my code began to generate errors after new updates, which didn't make any sense since the processes that were breaking weren't touched by me. Upon review of my code, it looked as though someone intentionally altered the code, just enough I wouldn't notice. Since I used source control software, I could easily see when the program was altered and who altered it. I reported this to HR as well as Helen's continuing issues. The HR person stated it wasn't enough. We had Bob as the author of the changed programs. Since it couldn't be verified, he was the one actually logged in. My boss, however, started to get upset as well with the issues and delays. He took notice, so he requested a secret meeting with the executives to figure out what was going on. The decision was made to put cameras into the office. One weekend, a crew came out and installed tiny cameras into the vents and began recording. What they found was shocking. Bob had always been an early person, but it was more than just to greet Helen. He would rummage through people's desks and stare at photographs, particularly of those with young girls. He took one of the photos and went over to Helen's desk, then dropped his pants and began pleasing himself. Once he was done, he went back to clean up his mess, which explains why her chair was damp. At my desk, he'd pick up my picture of my family and start finger flicking the image. This particular day, he decided to remove one of the capstans from my chair. Of course, on that day, we had no clue what was going on. From our perspective, what we saw was about 9 a.m. Several police officers entered the office and took Bob out in handcuffs. Surprisingly, a couple of employees clapped as he was let out. I guess he did something to them too. It wasn't until the police left that Helen and I were called in and was told what they found on the video. Helen immediately started to cry. I couldn't imagine what the hell she was feeling, but a violation so disgusting to cause such a breakdown. Of course, the owner and CEO were very concerned for the employees and offered counseling and any other services. things, including as much time off as a person needed, to help recover from this heinous act. It took time, but eventually, things got back to normal. But it was an experience I will never forget. I've heard about employees peeing into coffee, harassment, and other issues, but having experienced firsthand what it was like to know of these things, but at the same time make it difficult to report, is why I put stock in what people say as a truth rather than attention-seeking. It happens. What's worse is when it happens, and you can't really do anything about it. At least the company I worked set up cameras to resolve the situation. My condolences to all those out there whose company won't do a damn thing about it. Sweet mother of Christmas. Bob was a menace. Story 6. My boss lost an internal power struggle and was soon fired. The official reason given was he was submitting fraudulent expense reports. I'm not promoted but given all of his responsibilities, and I inherited his administrative assistant. Suddenly charges for car service, local hotels, and local liquor stores appear on my corporate credit card. I ask the admin about the charges, and she gives me an explanation that's plausible but that I know isn't accurate. I call the credit card company and contest the charges until they provide more info. I also started doing some of my own research on the charges. Turns out the admin assistant was an alcoholic who lived with her dog in the local hotel I was getting charged for. She was having the car service pick up her booze at the local liquor store and deliver it to her at the hotel. Why? Her dog had a nervous condition, and he liked that hotel. He would get upset if she went out to the store after she got back from work, so she used the car service so she wouldn't leave and upset the dog. She charged the expenses to my boss and my corporate cards because we owed her for making her come to work and leave her dog alone. I got her fired and successfully fought the credit card charges. Even though I found the person actually committing the fraud, my boss was still considered fired for cause because he signed the expense reports with the fraudulent charges. Story 7. Customer complained that the employee was stealing. Didn't believe it at first. The gayest man I've ever known was stealing Playboy magazines. No idea why. Got caught with them. Multiple copies of the same issue. Fired. One employee was spotted by a customer pleasuring himself on the roof before the store opened. Also used a magazine. Didn't believe it. Staked out the roof. Turned out to be true. Fired. One customer told me the bookkeeper is up to something because she didn't get a receipt for a space she rented. Didn't believe it. Turns out this employee was pocketing a few hundred at a time when a vendor paid in cash. Was doing all kinds of embezzling that wasn't easy to catch. Fired. Jailed. One customer walked in on an employee who was pleasuring himself. There was a lock on the door. Lock not used. Fired. Customer spotted receipt showing a coupon when they paid cash. Coupon code should have been cleared out of the system years before. It was a 100% off coupon. This employee made an extra $100 or so per shift. Fired. Jailed. Mystery as to how they found the coupon code. One customer found a camera in the women's restroom. I knew right away who it was. Staked out the camera feed until I saw him go in. Fired. Jail. One customer was huttoned by an employee. No idea why. It was the employee's first day. Fired. One customer spotted a security guard selling substances to his friends. He had been selling on his shift for over a year. Added bonus when we got rid of him. Thefts went way down. One customer complained an employee pointed and laughed when an old lady fell. Reviewed the tape. It was pretty pronounced. She had tripped on an end cap, fell, and wasn't able to get herself up. He was pointing and laughing for a while. When someone else helped her up, he was berated about doing nothing. Not fired though. Bro, where do you work? County jail or something. Story 8. I only know of this because it involved myself, but I was fresh working for a security company, given a new assignment with a couple of other guys on rotation. Someone who had been there a week or so more than me gave me the obligatory tour of the site, pointed out some hot spots, pointed out some key equipment that needed an eye on, etc. Less than a week of shifts go by where the same guy offers me a bump of Coca-Cola, which I decline. Just over a month later, I had a perfectly fine shift with no issues. About an hour before my shift boss calls me up angry as hell at me. Obviously confused, I get to the place early. The place has been turned over. Equipment is gone. Fence is busted wide open. The works. One of the on-site trailers has been broken into where just over $1,000 was stolen from a safe I knew nothing about because it was always locked. I was pointed to as the culprit. It took less than 5 minutes of conversation with the boss to get it ironed out, as because not only had stuff gone from this place, but other stuff had gone missing from other sites the Coca-Cola guy had been to before. Fast forward, and one of the things taken was towel and found in the guy's driveway. Might as well have dipped himself in red paint, let alone his hands. Needless to say, he didn't work for that company after that. Also had a depressed boss years later who tanked the entire company. Hadn't come into work for more than a day each week. Basically left his wife to do most of the work. Then, because of a workers' insurance thing, he was collecting cash from everyone. Exact same night, he ended up upside down in a ditch. When police arrived, he was discovered with 2 intimacy workers and a lot of Coca-Cola and just over $1,000 in cash. cash. He basically used the money he collected from me and the other personnel, to which was over 5,000 bucks, and barely had a grand left from it. He was arrested. The company went under. Took a while, but we got our money back. It blows my mind to think people like this exist and decide these decisions are the ones they are going to make.